Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about the Japanese Type 94 pistol designed by Nambu. We're going to talk about how this pistol got a bad rap and really does it deserve the bad reputation it has. And yes, we are talking about the Type 94 pistol, not the Type 94 Japanese tank, and not the Type 94 Japanese NCO sword. We are just talking about the pistol today. It's another one of those, M1 memes. Before we jump into the pistol, we need to go back into the pistol's history a little bit, which isn't really that far back. So pretty much in 1934, Kajiro Nambu was approached by people from the Japanese military, and they wanted him to design a new handgun. Pretty much the military the request was driven by kind of two complaints. One, that the Type 14 pistol was just too big. The pistol is just too big, it's too heavy. So that was the main sort of reasoning for it. The second one was that the 32 ACP handguns that the Japanese officers were using, 32 ACP was considered by them a good enough self-defense round, but it was not considered a good combat round. And it's one of those things people might not really know, that the Japanese military, they actually had quite a plethora of handguns that they used, both American and European handguns in 32 that they bought. One of the most common ones I have right here behind me, a 1910. You'll find every now and then an FN 1910 with like Japanese kanji on it, or at least you can track down that's Japanese used. This is Japanese used 1910, but this is again one of those guns that unofficially Japanese officers would buy and carry on them, but it was never like an official handgun. So the Japanese officials, they didn't want officers to be carrying 32s in combat. They wanted basically another handgun. Now there were two main requirements from the Japanese military for this new handgun. The first and most obvious, with that first complaint that they had, the new pistol has to be smaller and lighter than the Type 14. If you can tell, by the size of this in my hand, I mean, this is a pretty big, bulky pistol. So it needs to be smaller and lighter than the Type 14. The second request, it just kind of shows you how important it was to them that this was a request. The new pistol needed to have a magazine safety, meaning when the magazine is removed, the gun will not fire. That was very important to the Japanese because, and it's one of those things, I don't think I quite covered that right in my Type 14 video, but the Japanese military, apparently a lot of people weren't used to semi-automatic pistols and the way that you have a magazine that holds rounds and then that feeds into the chamber so that you can remove the magazine and there's still a round in the chamber and it can still fire. In a lot of people's minds, if you remove the magazine, there's no more bullets in the gun, then it's safe. Well, that was not obviously the case. With the early Type 14s, there was no magazine safety, and that was, again, added with these later ones. So they wanted the new pistol to have a magazine safety because I guess it was that important. So luckily for the Japanese military, Nambu had already been working on a new pistol design. And in fact, he had patents for this new design, what would become the Type 94. He had patents for it that he got in 1930. So obviously before 1930 is when he started working on this new semi-automatic pistol design. So he was able to really turn it around really fast. He submitted some prototypes, and then in 1934, the same exact year, he got the Army to officially adopt this pistol here as the Type 94. Now, why this gun is called the Type 94 is because this gun was adopted in 1934, which was the calendar year 2594, the old Japanese calendar 2594. So 94 for the Japanese calendar year of it, which is really interesting because that's not the same calendar year for this. The Type 14 was for the 14th year of the Emperor's reign. The Emperor died a year after the Type 14 was adopted. And so this pistol is named after the calendar year instead of the new Emperor, which naming pistols after the year is a much better nomenclature. Now, curiously, the Navy did not adopt the Type 94. I don't know why. I don't know if that was some sort of, inter-military rivalry sort of thing. But the Navy never officially adopted the Type 94. So this is an Army gun. Again, to go over it real quick, like the Japanese Army and Navy were split. Like they both had ships, they both had planes and everything. It was almost like Japan had two separate branches of the military that were almost identical, but just called Army and Navy, and they were really big rivals. And sometimes they would refuse cooperation with each other because of this rivalry, to their own, military success detriment. But so the Navy never officially adopted the 94, but the Navy did allow officers, Navy officers, to buy this private purchase if they wanted to. So it's not impossible that one of these would be found in like Navy hands or be documented to come from a Navy. But the great majority of these are Army. You can see what just happened right there. That's going to be one of the things I talk about later on. Now, just the year after adoption, in 1935, is when the Type 94 entered production. Again, pretty fast turnaround, really. Not too often do you hear of a government asking for a design, and then a year later it's in production already. That's pretty fast. Now, these were put in production at the Nambu Rifle Manufacturing Company under the supervision of the Nagoya Government Arsenal. So you will find both stamps on these guns. I'll show you that in a close-up in a little bit. But first, I want to talk a little bit more about the Nambu cartridge. I talked about it a bit in the Type 14 video, but this is something I want to touch on because I still hear this gun every now and then is being described as, well, the cartridge being described as every now and then as anemic. I still hear it from pretty prominent YouTubers calling this anemic. So I wanted to go over the ballistics of 8mm Nambu with you here just to maybe try to dispel this a little bit. So the Nambu, which is 8x22mm, it seems that military loadings were about 102 grain. I know there's companies like Steinel who reloads or manufactures 8mm Nambu, and they use like an 85 grain, about 85 grain round. But as far as I can find, I think they used like over 100 grain. So this math here is done with the 102 grain cartridge of 8mm Nambu at 1,000 feet per second, which is about sort of like the average speed that I can find out there, which that delivers anywhere between 200 and 230 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, which is not that bad. Now, to compare that with let's see, 380, which is 9x17mm, I think a lot of military loadings for those are around 90-95 grains, going about 1,100 feet per second, which is 240 to 255 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. Again, so they're very, very close. I mean, just 10 foot-pounds off. It's not like that's going to make, nobody's going to feel that difference. Now, to compare that, I want to compare that to 32 French long or 7.65 by 20mm, which those rounds are typically 77 grains, going 1,100 feet per second. That's about a 210 foot-pounds of muzzle energy on there. So you can see really, like the Nambu and 380 and 32 French long, they're very, very similar. And it's interesting because I hear people say like, oh no, 32 French long is actually, not that weak. But then at the same time, they'll put down 8mm Nambu when they're pretty similar. And just as comparison here for 32 ACP is 7.65 by 17mm. It can be anywhere from 60 to 73 grains, going from 950 to 1,100 feet per second. So that gives a sort of range muzzle energy of 161 to 175 foot-pounds for 32 ACP. So just to show it in comparison, the Japanese military, it's documented they didn't like 32 ACP, but they did 8mm Nambu. So again, ballistic-wise, I just want to maybe make people think before they just kind of regurgitate, the big cliche of 8mm Nambu is anemic. Now let's go in and do some close-ups. Now to start off with, I'm just going to go ahead and tackle the main controversy. It's a thing everybody knows and everybody talks about with the 94, is this exposed sear bar that's on the side of the gun here. Now, yes, when the gun is loaded, there's a round in the chamber and the hammer's cocked and the safety's off, you can press on this sear bar to make it fire. And yes, it'll even fire by pressing that with the magazine out of the gun. I don't think it's unsafe. Now, it's not a fantastic design, but this is not an unsafe thing because you really have to know, what you're doing. Like, you'd really have to know what you're doing to make that happen. So, like, I mean, I could, obviously you could see something. This is a purposefully done thing. So you could see something, nefarious, like the whole surrender pistol cliche of, handing over the pistol and pressing this to fire. It's definitely not a design feature like on purpose. The Japanese were never supposed to surrender, so why would they, why would they design a pistol for surrendering? But this is, just again, it's one of those features. It's not that big of a deal, but there, we got out of the way. We don't have to talk about it anymore. Now, the main requirement, of course, for the 94 was that it to be smaller and lighter than the Type 14, and that it definitely accomplishes. The Type 94 is about 2 inches smaller, and it's 5 ounces lighter. And if I sort of overlay them here, you can really see how much smaller the Type 94 is. I mean, it's a little bit awkward on camera, but you can tell with the trigger guards and trigger kind of everything being in the same place. Type 14 grip is way too long. I mentioned this in the Type 14 video. This grip is just way too long for the ammunition capacity. The Type 94 holds 6 rounds. Only 6 rounds. That's just sort of the what you give up for a short grip. I mean, the grip is a pretty short. This is kind of like a concealed carry pistol grip length right here. It's not too bad, really, for even for like a modern American hand to grab like this. But yeah, the 94 is much smaller than the Type 14, and it's kind of funny if you look at them in pictures. It doesn't necessarily look like the 94 is that much smaller, but it's definitely a good bit smaller. Now, one of the major improvements of the 94 over the 14 is the sort of internal firing mechanism. The Type 14, it's striker fired. There's a little striker that's released, and the Type 94 has actually an internal hammer. It's back here inside the pistol. It's shrouded, just kind of like a Sauer 38H. Now, this kind of goes back and forth between the argument between striker versus hammer fired, but they were having light fire issues with the Type 14, and now switching to this new hammer system. The Type 94s are going to be a little more reliable as far as cartridge ignition because of that increased force hitting the firing pins because of the hammer on it. And the manual safety on the Type 94 is a huge improvement. This is a lot more intuitive for a modern shooter. Up is safe and down is fire. If you were holding this pistol in your hand, you can just really easy say if the safety was on and you need to fire, you just flip it down with your thumb. It's a great improvement. Now, this safety, it actually physically blocks the sear bar. So when this safety is up, it actually physically, I don't know if you could see the sear bar flex sort of as I'm trying to press it there, but it physically blocks the sear bar from moving up on this side. So therefore, this safety, I don't think all of them are this way, but this one's a little loose, and I think this is legitimately just because the safety was on and somebody squeezed the trigger really, really hard, which squeezing the trigger with the safety on presses the sear bar outwards, which moves the safety out, which sort of, I think it sort of bent it a little bit. So now that it's a little on the loose side. So, I mean, this is evident that apparently the safety can get damaged from misuse. So not like the strongest or best safety, but a lot more intuitive versus the Type 14 safety, which is, the whole, 180 degrees throw that you have to do with the second hand. So both of these pistols have pretty much identical last round hold opens. You just have a little extension on the follower in the magazine that just goes up and holds the, holds the bolt back or the slide back. So you have, if you fired your last round, your gun would hopefully be in this position. Now when you release the magazine, the slide will drop. So that means if you put in your, your fresh magazine, you'd have to re-cock the pistol, re-rack the slide. I mean, I guess it's better than no hold open because it gives you a visual indicator that you're empty. Now the magazine release on the 94 is it's a little too prominent, it's a little too easy to activate. I think it just sticks out too far. I mean, you could just kind of brush the gun and open it up. That would never happen on the Type 14. Now, I mean, even in the holster, this is an original holster, and I noticed this after I bought it. The pistol can be in here, and you can actually hit right there. I just hit the magazine release. Yep, just put the magazine back in and released it there. So, like I said, I'll do that again just in case you don't believe me. And the magazine is out. So just, I mean, even inside the holster, you can accidentally depress the magazine release, which I guess at least if you put the gun on a flat surface, it doesn't stick out that far. Like it won't release like that. But very easy for this to get hit. Most of these magazines don't freely fall out, but I mean, if you had one that did fall out, I could see this. I could see magazines getting lost pretty easy with this guy. In case you were wondering, this is a nickel-plated magazine. The Japanese, they plated these with nickel up until January of 1942. They nickel-plated these magazines. I'm trying to think, January 1942, what happened? Something happened right before this. I can't remember right now, but yeah, so these will be nickeled on the earlier guns, like this one here, but later ones, these magazines will be blued. In August of 44, they switched over to wood, so you will find wooden grips on these later guns. Now it's kind of interesting, you'll find wood grips on earlier guns too, and you'll find plastic ones on later guns, because a lot of these parts are just kind of thrown into bins and assembled. But it's about August of 44 when the main switchover happened from this Bakelite to wooden grips. Now the wooden grips are very similar to like the 14, except they don't have the lines. It's just kind of like a smooth-sided grip here. And the Type 94 wood grips, they don't have this little extra contour here. It's just kind of like a straight little piece of wood. Now to go over some of the markings on the pistol, right here, we can see these markings. This is the actual model designation. So this first symbol is a 9, the next is a 4, and after that's type. So 9-4 type. Here's the two symbols. This is the same as on the Type 14. The symbol on top is at peace for safe, and then flame or fire for fire. Now the placements of the markings on this side of the pistol can be really different depending on like the year of your pistol. The maker marks and acceptance marks can be over here on earlier pistols. I mean, overall, the exact placement of these numbers are really different, just depending on your individual gun. Because I think these were all just stamped by hand, so the serial will be in this general area, but it can be a couple millimeters higher or lower, whatever, depending on your gun. Now the serial numbers, they were consecutive. They started at 1, and they ended, in the 71-ish thousand. Range. So, this gun is the 12,000th, whatever gun made. There's a few examples of that from another serial series that happened in 1943, but for the most part, it was a straight run from 1 all the way up. Back here at the top is just with the same thing as a Type 14. You have the first two numbers, 15, which is the Showa 15, which is, the way you calculate that is you add 25 to 15, and that gives you 1940. So this was made in 1940, and then 6 is for the month. So this is a June of 1940 pistol. Now underneath the date, you have these two manufacturing markings here. These didn't come highlighted, of course. This just kind of help you see it a little bit better. The first one here, this is the Nambu plant sort of stamp, the Nambu company stamp, and then next to that is the Nagoya Arsenal stamp. It doesn't mean this was made at Nagoya. This is just sort of their like acceptance stamp of the pistol. Of course, you see rifles and everything with the same exact stamp, but all Nambus pretty much, except for some really last-ditch exceptions, will have kind of all of these markings exactly the way this is. Now these serrations and this sort of cocking knob on the back, these are really like a fingerprint. These will be different on every single Type 94. No two will be exactly the same. A lot of them, like you glance at them, will look identical, but if you look close, the exact placement and everything of these will be a little bit different. There'll always be 7, except for on really, really early pistols, 7 serrations on the knob. But it's just one of those really neat things that this is really like a unique sort of fingerprint of the Type 94s. They're just kind of different on all of them. Now the Type 94 is not one of those toolless disassembly pistols. You're going to need some basic tools to take it apart, like a brass punch. A brass punch specifically because brass is softer than steel. It will not, scratch and dent or anything like that. It won't harm the pistol by pushing on it because you have this little pin here that needs to be pushed out. Now the first step of disassembling this is a little odd, coming from like modern firearms, because you're going to want to leave the magazine in. You want an empty magazine in the gun because you need the slide locked back. And the only way to lock the slide back is to have an empty magazine in it, and to rack it. The next step is that you have to press the firing pin, which is this little guy that's moving here. You want to press that firing pin in all the way, as far as it'll go, while pushing this pin out. But don't push the pin out all the way. So you want to kind of go like this. It's a little hard kind of doing this on camera. But press this in with your finger while driving this pin out. If you're getting resistance, it's probably because the firing pin is not all the way out, and it's very important to press the firing pin out because you can damage the firing pin by not having it pressed all the way out and pushing on this. So like I said, don't press it all the way out because this pin is the only thing that is holding the bolt and the slide together, because I don't know if you could see, the bolt and the slide are two different pieces on the Nambu design, and the only thing holding it together is this pin. So if right now, if you were to press out this pin, this whole slide is under spring tension and it'll go flying across the room. You can ask me how I know in the comments below. But you're going to hold the slide now and continue pressing this pin out. There we go. And now I'm kind of just holding this with my hand. I'm going to slowly let this go. See, the bolt's kind of staying put here. And there we go. Got the bolt out the back. Here's the pin here. Just so you know, when you're reassembling this, the pin, so you can get it in focus, the little pin on top, it goes in with the numbers up, reading it left to right. So if you're wondering like which direction this goes in, it's numbers up, being read normal, left to right. And then you just push this off. Oh, I did that part off camera, but I literally just pulled the slide forward off of the gun. And the barrel here is under spring pressure, so as soon as you take the slide off, this barrel and everything is going to come out. And it's kind of a few different pieces here. You have the slide, you have this barrel, this little bushing, there's a name for this, I forgot what it is, that holds the spring. And the barrel, these little locking lugs here go in to this little guy down here. So when you reinstall, you just have that in there like that. But while we have the gun apart, this will be a good time to look down into here, because this is where the hammer is, down under this little hood. It's kind of an interesting setup. This almost seems, I don't know, it seems modern or something. It reminds me of like a red dot on a modern handgun or something. But it's yeah, this is where the hammer is enclosed on the pistol. I'm not going to pull the trigger because I don't want it to fly forward. But at this point, you can remove the magazine and everything and clean the gun. I can also show you kind of up close maybe how the magazine safety works. Just moves it right there so you can pull the trigger. If you take it out, you'll see that move up and stop the trigger. And here's the pistol completely disassembled. Now, a thing of note is all of these parts are numbered except for, the spring in this part. Everything here has a number on it. It's going to be the last 3 digits of the serial number. So, 350, 350, 350. I mean, everything, even the little firing pin here has 350 on it. The magazine has 350. That's something really easy to check. It kind of helps you determine the value of the gun, if the magazine matches it or not. But all these components are numbered because these were all really hand fit. These were hand fit, hand assembled types of guns, And it's something that you want to, pay attention to if you're looking at buying one. If you feel confident enough to field strip one, if you're looking at buying it, if it's in person, that'd be something good. But honestly, I don't know if I'd feel comfortable like disassembling one of these like at a gun show or in a store or something like that, unless I had like a good punch and a good setup for these parts, because this is kind of a weird feeling pistol to disassemble. It feels a little like it's a little wonky. I don't know how to describe it. Just kind of like it's barely being fitted together until this pin is in. And that's just kind of a neat. It's one of the cool factors about Japanese pistols is just how weird they are. So just in case you're watching this to put the gun back together, this little locking piece here, this goes with these two. It goes in just like this, with the numbered part on the bottom. The numbered part is on the bottom, and these two going backwards. So just like that. And then the barrel, when the barrel fits on, the barrel goes on like this. Just so you know, it'll save you a little bit of time. I'm going to put the spring on the barrel. I'm going to put the firing pin back in the bolt. It goes with the number exposed here. So you can see the number. You've probably guessed this little hollow area in the back of the bolt. This is the area where the hammer fits. So the hammer swings up from the frame, fits into this little area kind of, and slaps the firing pin here. So with this kind of on, you might understand why I called this wonky. Now you're going to put the slide on, all while holding the barrel down into that little piece. And it's all, getting more and more spring pressure here. This is kind of hard to do on camera. You're going to press this back, kind of keep pressing it back. Okay, now we're here. We're going to hold it and put the bolt in the rear of the slide. And there we go. You'll get a little, so putting it in, you'll feel resistance, and that's because it's overcoming the hammer. So that goes in all the way, and like I said, with the pin, numbers up, going left to right. Oh, and you have to press the firing pin, and then press that in, and voila, the gun is back together, and it's working. Now, Type 94 production ended in June of 1945. Which is kind of interesting for two reasons. One, that it actually started in June of 1935. So this gun was made for like almost exactly 10 years, which is interesting. You hardly ever run into that. And also interesting because it was halted before like the end of the war. I'm guessing there was some sort of supply, logistical, whatever issues for why this gun was canceled, in June. Now, apparently there are some that were assembled after June from like leftover parts, stuff like that, but I think the official production stopped in June. The machinery, supposedly the machinery was moved over to the Nagoya plant to start producing other pistols, but that's sort of speculation. Nobody really knows exactly what happened to the machinery and stuff from this or what it was used for. But that's it. They made 71,000 Type 94s, which might sound like a lot, but they made about 280,000 Type 14 Nambus. So they made, for every one Type 94, they made 4 Type 14s. The Type 14s were in production longer and everything, and more arsenals making these. But that's, of course, 71,000. That's a sort of estimate number there. But there are a lot more Type 14s. We'll run across these a lot more often than you will 94s, making these a lot more uncommon. But it's interesting that 94s don't really bring that much more money than Type 14s. And I kind of think that's maybe a couple different reasons. One, the Type 14 I think it's a more elegant looking handgun. It looks a little bit more Luger-ish or whatever, so maybe collectors tend to appreciate this a little bit more. The Type 94, I don't want to say it's ugly, but it's not exactly a handsome pistol. Also, it's bad, the bad reputation that it got about being a surrender pistol or whatever, unsafe or something like that. Maybe that's damaged the pistol's reputation in the collector's market. But I mean, to me, I just love weird, funky pistols like this. And the Japanese made some really funky pistols, so I think that's really cool. But these are pretty collectible. And again, this is one of those things where, after World War II, the great majority of Japanese pistols came to the United States. So the United States is the main place that you'll be able to find stuff like this. And we, as American collectors, I think we sort of take that for granted, that there's just, Japanese pistols everywhere or whatever. But that's a kind of a unique circumstance. American service members brought them back home, and that's why we have so many here. Not all countries do. Not even the Japanese have a lot of these. So I think we're pretty privileged to be able to own these, and I just hope people can sort of appreciate that. Maybe a little bit more now. I'll go ahead and put the production numbers on the screen here so you can see how many were made in each year. You can see it really just kind of goes up and up towards the end of the war. It's kind of like with most countries and most guns during World War II. Now they say that the Type 94 mostly went to like the paratroopers and tankers and stuff like that, which does kind of make sense because the pistol is much smaller than the Type 14, so it's better suited for those roles. I can tell you it's really hard to find like pictures of soldiers using Type 94s versus 14s. They seem to be a lot less prominent in like frontline combat infantry sort of roles. So maybe they did see a lot more use in these other roles, like with the Japanese Army Air Force used Type 94s. I know of an example of a 94 that a Japanese plane crashed, and Americans ran up to the Japanese plane and they pulled a Type 94 off of off the body in the plane. If you guys are into Japanese military handguns, or you're maybe just interested in learning more, there's a lot I didn't cover in this video. I highly recommend picking up this book. This is a fantastic book on the Japanese military handguns. I'm not sure what the price is going to be right now because book prices fluctuate, but I put a link in the description that you can click on, and that'll take you to Amazon, and you can see like the current going price of this book. But I really do highly recommend this book for anyone. It's very well written. Not all kind of gun reference books are this easy to read, but I really did enjoy reading this. Now, on a serious note, if you guys want to help with the current crisis in Ukraine, one of the ways of doing it, you can pick a charity of your choice and donate straight to it. Another way is on my Teespring. I currently have a shirt that I'm selling, a St. Javelin shirt, and every purchase of that shirt, I'm going to be donating $5 of the proceeds from that shirt to the SaveTheChildren.org's Ukrainian Crisis Fund to help the kids in Ukraine right now, the kids and their families. And for every $5 that I donate from the proceeds of that, I'm going to donate $1 of my own money with each shirt. So each one of those shirts you buy, $6 is going to get donated to that charity. If you don't want the shirt, I'd highly recommend just find a good charity out there that you believe in and donate and try to help that way. There's other shirts in the Teespring as well, but that's the only one that you can get that'll donate to the Ukraine. So. If you don't understand the St. Javelin meme, do a little bit of research. But that's just something I wanted to offer you guys. Not being pushy at all. It's just out there for you. If you want other good milsurp designs, I have those too. But I appreciate you guys so much for watching. Thanks for watching. I noticed that compared to other gun YouTubers, like a lot of you guys watch and comment my videos, and I appreciate that from all you guys. The support's amazing. I love meeting you guys, at gun shows and stuff like that. So if you ever see me in public, say hey to me or reach out to me. And if you have a milsurp question, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, so you can message me at Milsurp World at Instagram or Facebook or whatever. If you have a question, you can send me pictures of guns or whatever, and I'll answer that. But thank you guys so much for everything. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video.